Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And in a very timely way, because with it being February, there are a lot of people that are starting to look at how do I want to go through the divorce process? So today I have Manisha P. Patel. She is an attorney and she specializes in ADR, alternative dispute resolution forms, as well as collaborative law. So I'm really excited to talk about collaborative law and the possibility that that offers people. But before that, I want to introduce you a little bit to Manisha. She is known for combining deep legal expertise with a calm, compassionate way of helping clients make decisions in really critical times. Because if you've been through a divorce or you're going through divorce, you know how emotionally overwhelming this can be. And we've had brain scientists come on and talk about how that derails our thought process and our decision-making process. So really having that sort of guiding hand to help you get in the right space is really important. In addition to being an attorney, Manisha has been, and I got to get this, my little cheat sheet here so I get this right. Manisha is the past president of the Greensboro Bar Association, and she is an elected counselor to the Greensboro Bar Association. And so I just find that is so exciting because that really shows professional commitment and a real interest in helping people understand the law. She has her own boutique law firm in Greensboro. She's an author of a new book coming up. We want to make sure we talk about that. And she also has a real passion for helping attorneys and people going through the divorce process to really understand how to help clients. So Manisha, welcome.
Hi, Marty. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's so exciting. I just love doing this podcast because I get to speak with so many professionals and experts in different areas of divorce and life through divorce and post-divorce. Before we get into this, why did you decide to make this collaborative law, family law, alternative dispute resolution? Why is this your area of focus?
This is a very interesting question. I was first introduced to collaborative family law while I was in law school, so almost 15 years ago. And I just knew about it, didn't really think much about it other than it was a different way for families to resolve their legal issues. And I followed the traditional family law route, if you will, of the adversarial litigation practice for a good portion of my career. And it was in about 2019 where I did the intensive training, the advanced training for collaborative law in North Carolina, civil and more tailored to family law matters. And I had a light bulb moment, if you will, in 2022, where it got to the point where after COVID, court delays, the litigation process, it came to head that this process, the traditional litigation model, is not helping families. Yes, it can be seen as an option, but there's so many other options to help families resolve their issues and preserve their, what I like to say, their emotional health, their mental health, and their financial health. Most of the time with litigation, attorneys are the only ones, quote unquote, winning. Yeah. And I wanted to shift my practice more in line with my personal MO of helping people. It's why I do what I do. And how can I best help the community, my clients?
Yeah. And that is such a positive message. And this always floors people when I say this. I think the statistics are something like only 15% of all divorces that are ever filed ever end up in litigation, but boy, those are the ones you hear so much about. So that means what? 85% of divorces never go through the court system. They're resolved either by the couple, through attorney negotiations, through mediation, or through collaborative law practices. So I think that's kind of an eye-opener for a lot of people that, because the first thing people do when they think about getting a divorce is they think, I got to lawyer up. And that is the perhaps the biggest first mistake everybody makes. So
Yeah. Well, one of that first mindset of I need a lawyer up often comes hand in hand with so much uncertainty and almost anxiety because it's most people have never gone through a divorce. They
right.
don't know what to do other than I need to find a lawyer. And oftentimes I find that people will say, I need a lawyer with I need a bulldog. I need
Yes.
one of those litigation in court bulldog attorneys that's going to fight for me. And all the while, that's great, but how do you get to that point, and what are the ramifications of that mindset? And that often comes with how are you going to find this bulldog attorney, and is that route the best option for you? And
Yeah.
so I find that a lot of people, especially with divorce and family law issues, and when I say family law issues, I mean like custody or children's issues along with the financials, they will try to meet with every single family law attorney in the city, in the town, and conflict them out for their other spouse,
Yep.
and that just sets the tone for how this dispute resolution is going to go, whether it's traditional through litigation or some of these other options that are available to families.
Right. So I'm going to break this down because I'm aware that some of the people listening to this podcast are going through this the very first time. They've never had any experience with this. When you say conflicted out, can you explain what that is and why some people think that's an effective strategy?
Yeah, so when I mentioned try to conflict out other attorneys in family law, conflict of interest is a major issue. I think with any attorney there is, but what a conflict of interest is when there are two parties or two sides with adverse interests to each other, meaning they have opposite interests, or those interests may not even be opposite, but they're not aligned in the same path. And so with that, attorneys can only represent one side, right? One party with one interest that they're trying to reach that goal for their client. A conflict would be if one attorney is representing or advising two different people whose goals, their legal interests are not in line. And so in North Carolina, that is a major conflict of interest, especially in our family law world. And so oftentimes one spouse, if they're even thinking about separation or thinking about a divorce, may go and, hit Google, look up family law attorney in like city, state, meet with maybe 4 or 5 of the top attorneys that come off the Google results. And that means their spouse cannot even meet with those 4 or 5 attorneys.
Right. Right.
Those attorneys are not allowed
Right.
under our ethics rules to meet with them.
And I've had clients that have called me and said, I found these attorneys on Facebook or Google or wherever they find them. And then they say, and I'm called and set an appointment. They won't take my appointment. I said, well, because your spouse probably conflicted you out on those situations.
Exactly.
And now that's not consistent, or is that consistent in all states? Like, are there some states where one attorney in family court can represent like the couple? I get mixed messages on that. So
I think so. My lawyer answer is going to be it depends on the state, but I know in some states, just by speaking with colleagues around the country, as well as North Carolina, honestly, as some allow with written informed consent of the parties with the conflicting or the not in line interests with each other. So if they are informed of that conflict, if they waive, they know what the conflict is, and they say, I don't care, I want this one attorney to represent both of us, and the other side is on board, they have to do it in writing and sign it.
Right.
And then that's kind of like the permission slip for the lawyer.
Right.
And sometimes people do that. Oftentimes it's kind of like what you mentioned at the beginning, when people can come together, figure out how they want to do this, and then they need to find a lawyer to make it legally
Right.
enforceable.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's where we see it most often.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've done mediated agreements where we've created the
Right.
memorandum of understanding, and then the parties have said, well, rather than hiring two attorneys to evaluate this, we'll mutually choose one. Um,
Right.
and I think there's always the question, though, who's paying that attorney, because that person is ultimately the client. And this is why,
Right.
and I'm just going to throw this in here right now. We are not, I am not an attorney. And on this podcast, Manisha is not providing any legal support, services, advice. This is strictly for educational, informational purposes. And you need to make sure that you are checking things out with an attorney in your jurisdiction before you make any decisions. I always throw that in there somewhere in this
Yeah.
podcast. So I really appreciate that distinction. Now let's talk a little bit about, because I think most people are pretty familiar with mediation. At least they have a basic understanding of what that is. On the other hand, a lot of people are very new to the concept of collaborative law, although it's been around for quite a while. Can you tell us a little bit about what is family law, or what is family collaborative law, and how does it differ from mediation? Because sometimes people see that as confusing.
Yeah. So collaborative family law, I make that distinction between civil collaborative law, which is all disputes between people or two entities. Collaborative family law is dealing with what we think in family law: divorce, separation, custody, support, property division, things like that. And so collaborative family law has been around since like the 80s.
Yeah.
I think it's geographically dependent around the country where it's more popular used. In North Carolina, our legislator adopted the Uniform Civil Collaborative Law Act in 2019, made it effective in 2020. So since 2020, we've actually had a framework of how to practice collaborative law in North Carolina. And with that, there are a few distinctions that differentiate collaborative family law from mediation, from arbitration, from your traditional litigation, file a lawsuit in court. With collaborative family law, there are a few hallmarks. So the first is everyone, I call the participants, the parties and their collaboratively trained attorneys, sign an agreement. People call it a pledge, a promise, a collaborative agreement. And it really is an agreement with the framework of the collaborative process. So people will go through this in their first collaborative session, and they will all sign it, that you agree you're not going to file a lawsuit. You agree you're not going to litigate. And in North Carolina, we do have provisions that if there is an ongoing lawsuit and the parties decide to switch into collaborative, there are legal mechanisms to put a hold on the court case to go into collaborative. So I think that's a great distinction if you want to shift into collaborative or you want to start in collaborative. There's that agreement not to litigate. And then if you do litigate, then you have to provide written notice, and your collaborative attorneys cannot be your litigation attorneys.
Right.
And part of that is having everyone start on a level playing field, because in collaborative family law, in your collaborative pledge, you agree to full disclosure. Everything's out on the table. There's no keeping things in your back pocket to sling it out at the most opportune moment. Everything is out on the table. And when you engage any third parties, those people and your collaborative attorneys cannot be subpoenaed for things discoverable or things, exchange documents, information during the collaborative process. It's starting from almost ground zero of the dispute resolution process.
Yeah.
And so with mediation, you have a mediator who's trained and skilled and has the resources of how to be a neutral to help people come to a decision. And as a mediator, you're not making the decisions. That's what an arbitrator or a judge would do. But with collaborative family law, it is the participants, those four individuals, literally and figuratively coming to a table to come up with the solutions themselves.
Right.
And I think that's such an important distinction, that the decision-making ability is put into the hands of parties in
Yes.
collaborative law.
I think that's fantastic. And I've worked with clients that are in collaborative law, and they have all come forward and said, "I'm working with a divorce coach or a divorce strategist," and they've said that, and that's very upfront. I don't ever get involved with the process, although I do know of collaborative models where there is typically a therapist that's involved that works with the couple. There's often a neutral financial person that comes in and does an assessment or evaluation on the assets, the property, and sometimes even a CDFA that comes in and looks at multiple ways of the couple dividing property to make it equitable, not just now, but also future based on tax issues. Is that also something that's typical, or is that a unique situation?
Again, I think this is something that varies based on what the family law climate is of that jurisdiction. I would say oftentimes we would engage with financial neutral. So also a CDFA is a wonderful resource that we have used. But also the mental health neutrals, not as much. I think those are more specific to
Right.
the families. And then one that I have used frequently, and I don't think you mentioned, is a child welfare
Oh,
specialist.
yes, yes, yeah.
And I think that is more common in my practice, so that the children's wishes, their well-being is put at the forefront. And when I do have collaborative matters, collaborative divorces that involve children, I often find that that is probably the number one priority of the parents, the
Right.
parties, and they want to put that as the forefront. If they have some conflict about custody or parenting, co-parenting, that's usually our first step to see, what about these children? What is going to be best for them based on the different positions, the different needs, the interests of the parents.
Right. And you're so right. I always find when both parents are committed to the well-being of the child, things
Mm-hmm.
just tend to evolve more
Oh yeah.
smoothly, because it's easy for us as the professionals in the room to then turn around and say, okay, that's the decision that you like. How do you think that's going to impact your children? And quite often people can they fact check themselves in real time and go, yeah, that works for me. Probably not going to work for my 15-year-old, or
Yeah.
whatever the age of the child
Right.
is. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, because I hear this all the
Yeah.
time from clients. I know what my answer is to this because I'm a supporter of collaborative law. But and the question I get is, well, I would like to go to or the comment I get is, well, I would like to go to collaborative law, and I would like to work through this amicably. But my soon to be ex, is a jerk, an ass, whatever they say, whatever term they use, a high conflict person. And I'm gonna say this, that they throw that narcissist word out there. A lot of people do, without really understanding that's a diagnosis. But they say, he's toxic or she's toxic. Is collaborative law only for those people that are already totally amicable and completely zen with how their divorce is going?
So I would say it's not just for those people who can communicate, or if they can sit at a table. And part of our North Carolina adoption of the Civil Collaborative Law Act is the fact that ethically we're also required to counsel people on all of the options. So we're required to counsel people on litigation, on collaborative, being on the other side of the spectrum of the adversarial nature, like the you versus me mindset. And then I counsel them about mediation. And then what I like to call is cooperative law, like being cooperative, is just attorney to attorney negotiation, or party to party, or attorney to unrepresented party negotiation, that you have not, like, I see this often when the other side does not have a collaboratively trained attorney. And how can we work through that in the best way possible. And so I've had situations where people want to do collaborative family law, and my after I've given them all the information of what all the different options are, but my first question is always going to be, is this going to be a safe option for you? Now,
Right.
when there's been a history of domestic violence, mental anguish, emotional abuse, that phrase goes often, is shared often as
Right.
well. I always want to make sure, even if they can communicate, they can sit at the same table or be on a Zoom screen together. Are you going to feel safe?
Right.
And if there is a hesitation in that answer, I'm going to take a step back from, advising them, encouraging them for collaborative family law, because it does require, being in the presence, whether it's on a screen or in person,
Right.
with the other party. So I will say, it doesn't always have to be everyone who's kumbaya getting along together, but it does help. And ultimately, even if can't communicate, or they're conflicting personalities, I still think it's a path forward, because when there are even children involved,
Yeah.
this process you will not be done with your co-parent, your separated spouse, forever. I mean, you're tied to this person with your children. It's not like they turn 18 and you're never going to see them at a graduation, at a birthday,
Or
a wedding.
wedding and grandchildren,
Yeah,
being born. And there's
grandchildren.
so many things
Right,
going forward.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I always say, I find collaborative law often, when you have that mindset about your separated spouse, it actually helps repair that relationship, that co-parenting relationship, because the way I structure the process, and I encourage my clients, the participants, all the parties, to use nonviolent communication. And through that, it's a different way of communicating. And rather than being more position based, you're talking about what you've observed, what are you feeling, what are your needs that are not being met, and how are you going to make a request to have your needs met. And I
Right.
think that framework really helps evolve people's relationships through
Yes.
this process.
Yeah, I love that. I did that course, that nonviolent communication
Yeah.
course, and the book is available. So if you want to read it, it's Marshall.
Rosenberg.
Yeah, Marshall Rosenberg. It's a great read. It's an older book, but I think it stands the test of time, because communication is communication. So I love that idea, and I so believe in this is the dissolution of a relationship. It's not a battle to the bitter end, and unfortunately.
Right.
I see so many people go in that and maybe it's fear, like you said at the beginning, or uncertainty about the future, but it's like you just assume the worst right off, like Jump Street. It's like, that is the worst person in the world. They're trying to get everything. They're trying to take everything away from me. And if you never talk, you just sit there and keep those thoughts in your head. It's coming together and having the opportunity. And collaborative law does that much more effectively, even than mediation, because mediation is really focused typically on getting through the nuts and bolts of the agreement, as opposed to, repairing the relationship necessarily.
Right.
Manisha, you have shared so much information. I have a feeling we could go on for a long time on this. It's obviously an area of passion for you, and it's one of my areas of passion. So I think that's great. But what do you think is the most important thing, or one of the most important things, that people should think about if they're considering anything that you've talked about today?
Yeah, well, you mentioned my upcoming book. It's called End Your Marriage Peacefully, Your Guide to Successful Collaborative Divorce in North Carolina. And one of the chapters of my book is a Choose Your Own Adventure, where we walk through the different options. And the reason I mention this is my biggest takeaway from or about collaborative law is that you have options. You have the freedom to make your choices. Once you get in front of a judge, it is a stranger telling you how to see your kids, when to see your kids, your finances, it's a complete stranger, Joe off the street, telling you what to do with these intimately personal core values, and your children, they were a part of you. So I find that this whole choose your own adventure, choose your own option gives people that freedom and ownership of how they want their future to look. And you may not get that with these other options, but with collaborative law, you truly have a say. Your voice is heard, not just by, Joe off the street, Judge Joe off the street, but your co-parent or the person you had chosen to share your life with at some point in the past. And it gives you that ability to make those decisions rather than just being told.
Absolutely. Manisha, tell us the name of your book again, please.
Yeah. End Your Marriage Peacefully, Your Guide to Successful Collaborative Divorce in North Carolina.
And is it out now, or it's coming out, or?
It will be out this winter 2026.
All right. So when you get that, when you get it, when you know it's coming out, come back on and let's talk about your book for sure. In the meantime, Manisha, you do have a gift for people today. Yes. Can you tell us just a little bit about that? And I'll put all the link to get it in the show notes.
Yeah. So it's just, it's a handout, a guide for 10 steps or 10 things to keep in mind when you are considering a separation or divorce, and what things do you need to evaluate in terms of you're considering a separation or a divorce and you want to talk to an attorney. It's a helpful guide to figure out those questions and also help you prepare for an initial meeting with an attorney for a divorce or separation.
Great. What a practical tool to have if you're planning on this. And if you know somebody who's going through a divorce, get them to listen to this episode and grab it. Even though you may not be in North Carolina, it's going to be applicable for attorneys anywhere. And that's always handy. Last question. If people want to find out more about what you do or maybe reach out and work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so the best way to reach out is for my website. It's www.lawofficeofmpp.com, and have a ton of information on the website about the different types of matters we handle. I also have an intake form on the contact page where you can fill out the information and we'll reach out to you once we get your contact information and look at that conflicts check. And so those are the best ways. We're also on social media, on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all those easy to find places.
Great. Well. And I'll make sure all of that gets in the show notes. Manisha, thank you so much for coming here and sharing this. And like I say, I'm looking forward to talking to you when your book is coming out as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thanks for having me.
And thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening in to this episode of the D Shift. And don't forget to tune in again to the next one. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.